So let's look at a scenario where reference modeling might become very useful. Let's say that you've got a scenario where you already have some motion capture that's been recorded, and you want to start working on cinematics or any kind of action described by your storyboards. It could be keyframe data. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that you have to get started animating, and you can't really wait for the modeling department to finish, say, the high-res version of the character, or the rigging department to finish the advanced level rig. Remember that the modeling department is essentially building off of this low-res mesh, and the rigging team is layering on top of this base skeleton. So we have something to go off of. If I look at the reference model, I'm currently working on the low-res reference. So anything I do to here, I'm going to want to make sure I preserve it so it can transfer into the medium res model and the various cloth models as well. I'm also going to add one final resolution, which will be my point cache resolution. This is actually a very useful resolution to have because we can actually point it to a file containing only geometry and no rig pieces, so it's the most efficient of the bunch. Eventually I'll hook this up, but I just wanted to put it there to make myself aware that I'm going to put in a point cache resolution as well. So down here in the delta, this records all of the different changes we make to our reference models and dictates whether or not we apply them to other reference models as we switch resolutions. So things like static position, so posing, function curves, expressions, again, you can read through this list. Almost everything can be recorded and applied to other models being referenced. So the first thing I'm going to actually do here, if I close this down, is I'm going to load in a tag template on my reference model. Now I can't really do this to the actual reference model itself, but I can do it to a model that contains a reference. So if I look under my motor tools, I'm going to go in and tag a rig. And if you'll remember from the early motor tutorials, we actually created a tag template for a rig very similar to this one, exact same naming convention and layout. So I can actually load in the footroll template structure file that I created for the advanced rig. Again, everything fills in nicely, so it's able to find all of those pieces. With that being said, we can then load in a piece of action. So I'm going to jump in and I'm going to load in the machine gun, the rifle. I'm going to actually have a piece of motion capture that allows the character to shoot the rifle. So we'll pick the model again, and this time we'll load a motion file. We'll load a motor file onto the character. So I'm going to look down through the list of available motor files, and I'm going to look for the stand and fire motion capture file. This is again derived from a BVH file. So I'll load that on, apply it to the character. I could start it at frame 1. And I end up getting a motion that looks something like that. So you have the character kind of raising the gun and firing. So at the moment, we've actually added information to our character, and that information is now stored in what is called the delta. So the delta is actually storing properties for us. In this case, the delta is storing the values stored in the mapping template. It's also storing the positions of all of our bones, all of the objects involved in our animation as well, and the various other parts of the body. So basically that's what the delta is doing, is just storing changes applied to the localized models. And of course, because they share the same skeleton, we want it to apply to all the other models. What I'm going to do now is start to layer in some constraints on top of this actual motion capture file. What I would probably want to do is plot the file out, but what I'm going to do is actually kind of get a gauge for where the hand positions are when the rifle is aimed, and I'm actually going to bring in a model of let's see, we'll bring in this medium res rifle here. Remember, I've also got a model containing a lot of ice effects as well. And we're not really focusing on that for the moment. We'll get to that. But for now, I'm going to focus on scaling up this rifle model. So I've got my rifle SRT. I'm going to scale it up to be twice as large. Maybe a little bit larger. Actually bring this up into place. Rotate it around 90 degrees. And kind of align it as best I can. So it's a little small, so I'll make it a little larger and get it into position here. So this actually works out pretty well because with the motion capture, I'm able to kind of get in here and size the gun up to my particular character. There's a few adjustments I'm going to need to make to the mocap file. I don't really like the positioning of the hands here. Again, this is on frame 26. So I'm going to adjust the mocap, and I'm going to take the left wrist, and I'm going to do a bit of an offset on it. I'm going to slide the wrist forward in the positive z-axis, and I'm going to lower the position on the stock of the gun. Slide it over. And maybe back a little bit. Okay. There's not really much you can do to the function curves at this point because we don't actually have function curves. So I think this is a fairly good position. I'm going to plot out the motion capture file now to a series of function curves using the plot function. And I'll do an interval spacing of, let's say, every 6 frames. And let's plot that out. So I'll press OK, and we'll calculate our transforms, and the plot may take a little bit of time. It's a few hundred frames worth of animation. So while this is calculating, I'll just pause the Camtasia and open it up again once all the calculations have been completed.